Hello and welcome to a standard deck profile. Today I want to talk about Zerith Fantome. This is a deck that it has a lot of potential, especially if it gets some new cards, which we know it's getting with the movie. But as is, it's already a pretty solid deck to play. It's pretty consistent. It has a lot of compression, so it hits triggers, and it has a very powerful game-breaking effect of putting any trigger except the over trigger back into the deck with its Phantom skill, allowing you to do things like put 4 heals back, which is extremely powerful. The downsides are that sometimes this deck gets caught with a lot of orders in hand and can't guard effectively. And you have a bad matchup against Regiregnus, because if you just go second and they 6 attack you on turn 3 while you're on grade 2, you probably don't have the shield value to survive. But without any further ado, let's get into the deck, starting with the ride line. This is Future Magic Caster Zerith. This is our starter, and you have to play this one because it's referenced by the grade 1. Then we have our grade 1 Apprentice Magic Caster Zerith. When it's placed by writing from the 0, you Soul Blast 1, search your deck or hand for up to 3 magic orders with different names, and you put them in the order zone, and if you search the deck, you shuffle, and if you put 1 or more from hand, you draw. Note that it's only 1 or more, so the way it's worded, if you have 2 in hand, you're not going to draw 2 cards. You're just going to be down a card for no reason. Let's show the magic orders now. We have these 3 orders, starting with the grade 1. We have Enhanced Magic Storl King. This one will let you rest it to give something 5k, and it's a hard once per turn effect. You need to have an effect of a magic caster to rest another order. You can only play 1 of these per turn. We don't have Baruchri up, so obviously we can't do that. So we're limited to just 1 activation per turn, but that's fine. That's all you need. Then we have the grade 2 order, Growth Magic Vextel. This one lets you draw a card once per game on when the first time you rest it, and then for the rest of the game you can draw a card and discard a card. That's still pretty good because, as mentioned, we have a lot of orders, and our orders are more useful in the drop zone, especially from turn 3 onwards. Then we have Healing Magic Aix Lunis. This one lets you call a unit from drop to rear guard, and then you shut off all of its auto abilities, I believe. So that just means that you don't get any of the on-place effects. It should be fine because it only affects that call. So if they have anything that's like when they attack, you'll still be good. You're just not getting any abilities on place, which is fine. You know, maybe you'll be down a card because of that, but you're already up a card because you called it for free without using a card from hand. So those are the magic orders. Let's just put these over here for now, and let's get to the grade 2. This is Peerless Magic Caster Zerith. When this is wrote upon by a grade 3 unit with Zerith in its name, you search your deck or face-up damage for face-up damage cards for up to 1 Grand Magic or up to 1 Crimson Moon card, and you put it into drop. You're generally trying to find the Grand Magic here, but if you really can't get the Moon or you already have enough magics to function, you can get the Moon. And then you shuffle, and if you put a card from the damage zone, you put the top card of your deck into the damage zone, and you get you can play 2 orders, but you can't play an order with the same card name as another order you played this turn until end of turn. So you get to play a Moon and a Grand Magic, which is pretty good. Keep in mind that for the rest of the game, you won't really have a clean opportunity to play your Moons because you really need to be playing a Grand Magic every turn. So once you ride up to 3, that's it for your Moons. And then we have our main Vanguard, Grand Magic Caster of Transitory, Zerith Fantome. So this has an Act skill on V. Once per turn, you can counterblast 1 to call a Great Magic Caster of Transitory Zerith Fantome token to the back row center R, and it gets red text that it can attack from the back row, and it performs a drive check. And this is our token. Confusingly, it just has the same name as the Vanguard, so when you're searching for this, it can sometimes be a little bit of a pain. But it has an auto effect that when your other unit is attacked, you can retire this, and that unit gets 10k power until end of battle. I know it says end of turn on the card, but it's been errata. That's a misprint. And then it has an auto skill. At the end of your opponent's turn, you retire this unit. So there's no holding this around till the next turn so you can avoid paying Counterblast. You have to pay the Counterblast every turn because this is one of our most important effects. And you might as well use the retire for power effect because you're going to lose the token at the end of turn anyways. Then we get onto the Phantom skill for Zerith. This is an Act skill on V. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can bind all of the Crimson Moon cards from Soul and drop, and you choose up to the same number of trigger cards without overtrigger from your drop as the number of cards you picked for the cost, and return them to deck and then shuffle. And then until end of fight, you cannot activate a Phantom skill of a unit with the same card name as this unit. So that is really important that you can only do this once. That means that your one activation has to be worth it. You really need to be putting back all 4 moons and getting 4 triggers with this activation. And this gets better the longer you wait. The later you are in the game, the more compressed your deck will be, and the more trigger density you'll have, so the more you'll feel the impact of putting back 4 triggers. So generally you want to wait until your turn 5 if you're going first. Actually, it's turn 5 either way, sorry. Until turn 5, because then you can combine this with the effect of the Grand Magic Order and Persona Ride to make a potentially very lethal turn. Otherwise, just anytime you're far behind and you can put multiple heals back, try to put at least 3 heals back with this effect if you're going to go for that play. You can do that to just increase your survivability. When you're ready to kill the opponent, you can put back all crits and all fronts, depending on if they're at 5 damage or not. But overall, it's a really strong effect, and it's the kind of thing that you can't just like look at and measure. You have to play with this kind of effect and get experience to see how busted it truly is. With this effect, we can take just a bunch of decks to deck out. So always be on the lookout for matchups where you could play strategically and deny them counterblast and stall the game out until you can run them out of cards. If your opponent's ever turboing through their deck and is way lower on cards than you, then playing a control game plan can be a route to victory. And I'm not like exaggerating that. That's actually honestly almost as good as your plan A, depending on the matchup, of course. I believe that's why it was played in Japan. People were talking about using this to deck out Yakuza. So that is the ride deck. Let's talk about the main deck. We, of course, have 3 copies of Persona Ride. We really need a Persona every turn for this deck. The numbers aren't good enough without it, and we need to generate a soul, and this deck has no native soul charge. So this is really your only way to get extra soul, and depending on how often you miss Persona Ride, you might run out of soul at some point, and you won't be able to activate your Grand Magic Order. Then we have 2 copies of Roaming Prison Dragon. This is a flex slot, and it's a really good card to have. Every time you play a normal order, this card calls itself from drop, and then you choose either 10k power or 1 crit. It's a base 5k unit, so picking the crit is kind of dicey, especially in the early game. If you're on Zorga and you Alchemagic, you get both, but we don't have Alchemagic in this deck, so we can't do that. So generally speaking, you're just going to be calling this for the power, but if you're on a Persona Ride turn with 3 Grand Magics active, you might want to consider getting the crit, especially if your opponent's at 4, because then if you pick the crit, you only need to hit 1 other crit to do the attack pattern that forces your opponent to guard everything. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, when your opponent's at 4 damage, if you swing with something with a drive check, they have to guard it because you could hit a crit. And then you swing with your Vanguard, they have to guard it because you could hit a crit. And then if you hit 2 crits, you put them on your rear guards, and you force the opponent to either guard everything or gamble on hitting a heal. And this is at its most potent when they're at 4 face down damage. With Roaming Prison Dragon, we only need to hit 1 crit to threaten that attack pattern. And that can be pretty strong and really inconvenient for decks that need like 2 CB to function every turn, or decks that need to have a CB, but they're at all face down damage, like I mentioned. So keep an eye out for that play, but most of the time you're going to pick the power, and especially once they're at 5 damage, you're always going to pick the power. This is just a flex card. You don't have to play this, although I do think this is the best card for the slot. Another thing that other people I know who have built this deck prefer is Rancor Spear Trooper. This is an old card from original set from DBTO5. This card has the effect that it gets 5k for each order card in your bind zone. And once you've used your Phantom skill, and once you've got 3 Grand Magics, that's 7 orders, and that's plus 35. So it's a 45k base attacker plus Persona Ride for 55. And you factor in, you're probably going to have a grade 1 Phantom booster. That's another 13. This thing hits pretty big numbers. The only reason I don't like it personally is because it does nothing in the early game and mid game. It's a card that only sees its true value in the late game. However, because we have a magic order that lets us call from drop, we can safely discard this or intercept with it or guard with it or whatever you want, and then reanimate this specifically on the turn that we're ready to win. So it's not the end of the world to play this card at multiple copies even, and that's a decision you're going to have to make. You're trading late game closing potential for consistent value, because this represents a card every turn that you don't have to play from hand, as well as a virtual card every time you have to discard, because it will just call itself back without any pomp or circumstance. Then we get to our grade 2s. We start off with 4 copies of Black Sky Marine General. I can never read this card. Lamina. This is the Moon Cycler for this deck, or for this nation. All the nations have a card that discards in the ride phase for Energy Blast or Soul Blast to search for a moon when you use them as fodder. And that's a pretty solid effect. It's going to help you thin out those moons pretty aggressively. And then they all have an additional effect when they're placed on Guardian. All of the moon cyclers have the effect that you can counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to draw a card when you guard with them from hand. So they're really solid because in the late game, we don't actually have any way to spend energy. So you can just use these to spend your energy and plus cards. We only have one other energy spender in the deck, so it's 100% going to this card most games. And if you're going second, you have an extra 3 energy floating around anyways. Then we get to our primary attacker. This is 4 copies of... this card's always hard for me to read. My eyes are not what they used to be. Cognizant of Zerith Fantome. So this card has the effect that when it's placed on R, if you have a Vanguard with with Zerith in its card name, you counterblast 1 and you look at the same number of cards from the top of your deck as a number of Phantom units. Then you choose a card from among them and put it in a hand, and you choose up to 1 Phantom or up to 1 normal order from among them and put it into drop and shuffle the deck. So if you have a full board, you could be checking the top 6 with this card, and that's a really good effect for 1 CB. And then if you see any moons or grand magics or any cards with Phantom that you don't need anymore, like redundant cyclers or additional copies of this card perhaps, you can just mill them. And it's overall just pretty great. This is the best card in the deck, really, and you should be playing 4 copies at all costs. And then we have an auto skill in the front row. When a grade 3 or greater Phantom attacks, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Zerith in its name, this unit gets 5k. So you're going to, basically when your token attacks, when your Vanguard attacks, you're going to get +5. So this is starting out at 20 power. Really solid, really great effect. That's going to help us hit pretty big numbers combined with all the incremental bonuses we're going to get. So this is Mutual Feelings Maiden Pence. Sorry, I had to sneeze there. It's an ace unit, so you can only play 1 in your deck. And it has a unique skill that you can only activate once per turn. In our case, it's when it's placed on R, you get 5k until end of turn. And then Energy Blast 3, look at the top 7, choose up to 1 from among them and discard it. And then choose a card from your drop with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard and call it to R. That's a really strong effect. That's essentially going to help us find our Grand Magics. It's going to help us find any of our missing Phantom unit pieces, Blood Moons, whatever we need. Sorry, Crimson Moons. Really great effect, and it's going to also just compress and get a card out of our deck so that we can hit those triggers. And then when this unit attacks, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, until end of that battle, this unit gets 5k. And if your drop has 10 or more cards, it gets another 5k. So if you play this when your opponent's on grade 3, you're going to be attacking for +15, which is a really good number. It makes it already one of the strongest attackers in our deck. The only downside of these is that they don't have shield value, so they can be a little annoying to draw when you already have a bad hand. Then we have our grade 1s. We're playing 4 copies of Collating Junior Signa. This card, when it's placed on R, if you have a Vanguard with a Zerith in its name, you check the top 3, and you choose up to 1 from among them and discard it and shuffle. And then if you have a Zerith Vanguard, it gets 5k shield when it's on Guardian. So this card is really good. It's at 8k, that's going to be a 13k when we play our Grand Magic, or an 18k if we're in the late game. And it's just a free, no cost, regardless of what zone it's placed from, check top 3 and mill. So it's really solid overall. It's also going to be counting for our grade 2 for the number of cards we get to check the top pile of. And that's really strong. And for all those reasons, I play 4 of this instead of Philander. You can play like 1 Philander and cut 1 of these. I wouldn't play 2 because you really do need a bunch of Phantom units in play. But Philander essentially does something similar. It's on place from hand, check top 5 and mill a card. And then if you have 10 or more cards on the drop, it gets 10k. So it's an 18k booster or attacker. And this card gets almost the same number, but doesn't have the from hand restriction. So you can call it off of Crimson Moons and still get the effect. And it's a Phantom and it's 10k shield. So it just has enough small upside to be roughly equivalent to Philander, I'd say. But the fact that it's a Phantom name makes it a little bit better. Then we have our PGs, 3 normal unit PGs. Just play the ones that say that if you have 1 or less cards, they're free. And then we have 1 Elementaria, nothing fancy there. One protection twin cast is our Regalis piece. You have to play in order every turn, so you can't play any of the Regalis pieces that aren't Blitz Orders or Fire Regalis. Fire Regalis is really the only other one that fits in this deck, which will help you rebuild your board if you're playing against Retire matchups. So it's not a bad choice. Then we have our Crimson Moonlights. We're a Phantom deck, so of course we're playing 4 of these, and these are the good ones. Don't play the cheaper, lower rarity ones, because whenever you whiff on these, you're going to really wish you had upgraded. So these have the effect that you can play them for free if you have a Phantom Vanguard, and you look at the top 5 cards of the deck, and you choose up to 1 card from among them, reveal it, and if you did not reveal, you shuffle the deck and draw. If you reveal the card, you choose one. You do one of the following based on what it is. If the revealed card is a unit card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, you call it to R, and if it's a Crimson Moon, you put it in hand. Worth noting, our Grand Magic has an effect that it's counted as a Crimson Moon, so we can grab this with our Crimson Moonlight. And then it has a continuous effect in that it can't be bound other than for the cost of your Phantom skill. And in Bind Zone, it can't be chosen or moved to any other zones by any player's card's abilities. And in the Damage Zone, we can just put this card in a drop and put the top card of your deck into the Damage Zone. I think it needs to be face up to activate this, if I remember correctly. So be careful with your Counterblast. But this is great. It gives us much more board building potential in the early game, which can help us rush down a bit to make up for our slow, grindy game plan. And then we have 4 copies of Phantom Grand Magic Guild Radur. This card can be played from drop, and you play it by Soul Blasting 1, if your Vanguard is Zerith. You bind it, and your Vanguard gets continuous on V. All of your Phantom units get 5k, and if your Bind Zone is 3 or more copies of this card, they get 10k instead of 5k until end of turn. Really strong effect. 5k to the board is insanely good. It includes our Vanguard. It doesn't say rear guards, so everything gets additional power. It's overall 10 out of 10, no notes. And then continuous effect, it cannot be bound other than by this ability. And if you have a Vanguard with Zerith in its name, it's regarded as a Crimson Moon card when you check for Crimson Moon cards abilities. Then we get to our triggers. We have 4 heals, 3 vanilla heals, and 1 Zipsophila Fairy Asher. This is the anti-restand heal. It gets 15k shield if the opponent has attacked 2 or more times with that unit. It's base 10, so that goes up to 25. This helps you hit a lot of really great numbers against decks that restand their attackers. But against decks that don't, it's a strictly worse heal. So playing these is a bit of a gamble on what matchups you're going up against. So I'm playing 3-1 because the meta has shifted such that the decks you really have to worry about are Regiregnis and Ichikon. And while Ichikon does restand, it generally only does so in the late game. And so for the early game to stay low, which is the best defense against Ichikon's Guard Restrict combo, you need to be playing these. So I'm only playing 1 copy and hoping to get it and hold it in hand until the late game against Aichi and just use it when necessary against everything else. Then we have our crits. I'm playing 4 of the effect crit, Aspiring Maiden Alana. When you boost with this, it goes into Soul and you choose a unit and give it 2k. The power boost doesn't really matter, honestly. We're here for the Soul generation. For matchups where or for games where we didn't Persona Ride, we'll start running out of Soul and we need to play our Grand Magic every turn. The worst thing is when you need Soul and you can't play your Grand Magic, so you can't kill your opponent. So 4 of these just help mitigate that. And we still want to be playing 8 crits because we can put our crits back and try to threaten lethal with our 3 drive checks. Then we have 4 vanilla crits. These are just 5k crits, nothing else to say. Play whatever artwork you like. And then we have 3 of the shield fronts, Frenzied Heiress. They get 5k if the opponent's on grade 3 or greater, totaling up to 20. These are really important. You can't really substitute these with the soul fronts in this meta because there's so many decks that can kill you on turn 3 if they get lucky. These guarding for 20 against Regiregnis's 18k Vanguard swing are so important. Then we have our Overtrigger, Bless Favor. It's the Stoic Overtrigger. This is really good. It's 1 of every trigger effect, including the heal when you drive check it. So it's just really strong. The front trigger effect, it means that some scenarios you don't actually have to put the Overtrigger on the Vanguard to break a 2 to pass if you already checked the trigger. And that means you can then put the 100 million somewhere else, which is devastating. But just getting a heal, a draw, a front, and a crit, and 100 million is good enough on its own. It already puts it in the top tier of Overtriggers. If you really don't want to play this one for whatever reason, you could play the red OT to get another attack. The blue OT, I think, would just be weaker than this. The purple OT would just be weaker than this. The yellow OT doesn't do anything for us, etc. So it's really this or the red OT, and that's it. And I think this is better by a lot. So that's the deck. Let me pause the video real quick and show you what the Persona Ride kill turn might look like. All right, so this is what our board might look like on a super late game turn. You have two decision trees really you can go with the Phantom skill. You can either try to play for a stall game or try to play for a kill turn. Let's assume that we're playing for a kill turn right now. So our deck's fairly compressed. We're in the late game. We've used 2 Grand Magic orders. We will Persona Ride to draw a card. If we draw a heal, that's not the end of the world. And let me get the dice. And the good news is that despite us having nothing in hand to call, we are already going to be able to build a fully functioning board just by activating the Vanguard once and by calling this grade 2 using the Vanguard skill, or using the order skill. Just like that, we have a full board ready to go. We're going to then play our Grand Magic order by soul lasting 1. You're generally going to be tight on soul for this deck for most of the game. And that's going to give all of our Phantom units 10k because we now have 3 of these in bind. So we're hitting pretty solid values right now. And even the Vanguard gets another 10k. Then we're going to activate our Phantom skill. So we're going to take these 4 moons and bind them. And then we're going to pick 3 crits to put back in the, or we'll go 4 crits, assuming this is an attempt to kill the opponent. 4 crits, which you would go for either when you're very confident that you don't need any defense, or the opponent's like super low on cards in hand, or when you have no choice but to win this turn or perish. If you have a better hand, like let's say we had like these in hand instead, and our hand was pretty defensive, and the opponent was close to deck out, and or we could just stall them forever and they pose no threat to us, we could put back instead heals. Although in this case we only have 2 in the drop, so we would have had to have more heals out. But you'd put back all heals, and then now you're very unlikely to die, and you have a chance of just healing aggressively down from 5. Like, if you know your opponent's going to survive the next turn, maybe you do that because you're running out of counterblast, because this deck doesn't have any native countercharge. But for our purposes, we're going to... Oh, there's the heal. I put back a crit and heal, not 4 crits. There's the mistake. So, we put these back. Sometimes you just need to weather the storm one more turn, and by putting back 4 heals, you guarantee that it'll happen. Alright, sometimes you can also use the grade 2 and the grade 1 when you're in a situation like this, where you can try to get the last few non-triggers out of the deck, and then you can activate Phantom skill to have a very trigger-dense deck. But let's assume that our deck is good to go. We just have a perfect card in hand, but that's fine because we're going to win this turn, right? So we begin by attacking here for 23. In case we had a front, this will give the front row power, and this is the smallest attack of the turn anyways. It has a drive, so the opponent has to respect it, generally as if it was a 33k, or rather a 38k. And we hit a crit. That's pretty good right off the bat. Let's assume that they guarded this for 38 and it was 2 to pass. So let's just put everything here. We know that we're very likely to hit crits, so this isn't that greedy. This just forces them to spend PGs here on a Vanguard that isn't as big as the rear guards are going to be. And then because grade 3 Phantom attacked, our grade 2s get 5k each. So then we swing Vanguard, which will be 43 now with a crit. That's a really good number. It makes 2 to passing this very hard, so they probably have to burn a PG right here. And then we hit a crit. These, by the way, went up another 5k. We can move 10k here, and our Vanguard doesn't restand, so we can just move this over here. And then we hit a heal. So whatever we put the crit on, let's just say this, will be that, and then we'll heal 1, and we'll just put the same power on that. Double checking that I haven't added an additional 10k where it's not supposed to be. These were plus 10, and then plus 10 from the order. And then, yeah, so one of these has extra power on it. This should have been plus 20 total, and then 10 for the first trigger, 10 for the second trigger, and this one is like this, plus 20. Okay, there we go. And then we just swing here for this giant number with crit. It's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 78. That's a PG or die number. And then over here we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 58. So really good numbers. And if we had hit double crits, it would have been fine. I think I'm supposed to be one less damage, and then this heal is supposed to be in my hand. Yeah. And we've healed down one, so we have a chance at making our way through the opponent's next turn, especially if we put back all heals. But in this case, we put back all crits. And then our damage is going to be all triggers. Yeah. So that gives us a chance at survival. With this, we're probably not surviving if the opponent has like a Persona ride full turn, but if we're lucky and they don't, then we're good. Another thing we could do, aside from trying to force through lethal by baiting out their last PG with our Vanguard swing, is we could just go power and crit here from the first swing, and then we could go power and crit here from the second swing, and then the Vanguard would just swing for its 23k, 33 with Persona Ride actually, and then if we hit the one crit we hit would have gone there. We got that one from the token, and the one heal just makes one of these bigger. And then this is another scenario where they're dead. This is better if they're at 4. If they're at 5, the other way is also fine. At 5, you have kind of another decision, which is do you put back crits to stop them from healing? So you might want to do that if all their heals are still hidden. Or you can just put back 4 heals, knowing that any hit is lethal. And then, or maybe 3 heals in the front. And then everything is lethal, and if you hit these, then the opponent dies. And if you somehow don't kill them, you have the chance of hitting back-to-back heals to survive one more turn. A lot of routes you can go. We could have done the 4 Phantom skills for heals as soon as we possibly could. Put back something like 3 heals in the front to try to get an early defensive leg up and give us more chances of healing and staying low throughout the game. You can also occasionally do the tempo play of just immediately putting back 4 crits. That does give you the chance of sacking your opponent in the mid-game, but I think it's a less consistent game plan because your deck is not compressed enough yet to fully feel the effect of putting back 4 crits. So you still have plenty of chances on hitting non-triggers. And you're taking away the option of pivoting to putting 4 heals back, which you might need to do if you don't kill them the turn you put back your 4 crits. In general, I think it's also better to wait until you have the 3 grand magic orders before putting back offensive triggers, just because this is the turn you have the most kill pressure. It's going to be the one that depletes their hand the most. And then if you also are hitting multiple triggers, it's the highest chance of breaking through and killing them. After this turn, if you've damaged a Persona or you just haven't drawn the last one, there's a good chance your next turn won't have as much pressure, or that you have no pressure for the rest of the game if you're out of Grand Magics or Persona Rides because of damage. So in that case, this is like your best shot, and so this is the one where you would want to put everything down and hope that you can stumble across the finish line if they somehow survive. But that's the deck. It's a surprisingly difficult deck to play. If you make mistakes in guarding, or if you are greedy with your moons and you wait too long, or you use them too soon because you're panicking, you can lose a lot of potential power in this deck, and you can just die. If you spend your CB wrong, you can sometimes break yourself on CB if you don't start hitting heals. So knowing when to slam this card to try to dig for pieces, or when to just commit as few cards in hand as possible and rely on your roaming Prison Dragon and Call from Drop to build a board, that's like the other way you can play this deck. There's a lot of decision points. What you mill off of these cards, for instance. If you're making the correct decisions in like at least 90% of the cases, this deck will be strong enough that you can contend with even some very top tier decks. But if you're making a lot of the wrong decisions, if you're making the wrong call greater than 50% of the time, for instance, you probably are just going to lose a lot. This deck isn't the most powerful deck. It's relying a lot on its synergy and with its deck recycling capabilities to lean on for its win condition. It doesn't actually have the raw power to carry you even if you're a bad player. So this is a deck to avoid if you're not confident in your skills. It's not the kind of deck to play if you're like a new player and you're just looking to have a fun time. This is a deck to play with more certainty, more confidence. If you play this with the attitude that it's like the same as playing like Overlord or something, then you're gonna die a lot. But that's it for now. I do think this deck is really interesting and fun, and if you're more of like a grindy or control player from other card games, this is the closest to a grindy mid-range or control deck you can get right now. A lot of the other ones have been kind of ousted from the format, but we still have this one, and it has a lot of stall potential too if you like doing that. And that's all for now, and see you next time.